And minimize. Okay. Okay, everyone. So thank you so much for attending this morning's session of Simply Reports for Public Services. So over the next hour, we're just going to take some time to examine a few item reports and bib report examples to hopefully illustrate some ways you can use Simply Reports with collection reports. So, prerequisite, we did ask for this session that you already knew the basics of how to build a report. So we're not going to go over the whole like signing in and, this is how you add output selections. Instead, we're going to take the time to focus more on how to use the various filters and output options to build effective reports. So I'm hoping that even if the examples we go over may not apply directly to your library or collection area, that you'll instead be able to take away some new insights on certain filters, just kind of expand your report knowledge. So the session is being recorded, and the recording and the chat log will be sent out to CCS libraries and posted online. So it should be the link should be in tomorrow's CCS e-newsletter. And I will also email it out to registered attendees along with a summary of the output and filters we selected for each example. So, if you miss something when you're taking notes, don't feel stressed by having to keep up. I'm going to try to pause and check the chat every so often. If you chat, I might not see it right away, but like I said, I'm going to stop regularly and check. And with that, let's go ahead and get started here. So to start, okay, it don't want to. I'm not starting exactly with a report prompt. I'm not going to build a specific report. But with a weeding report, there isn't going to be a single recommended way to build it because it's really going to differ based on your library. And it might change based on how your library divvies up collection duties or how they use certain fields in an item record. So instead, I just kind of want to talk through how certain filters will impact your report. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth in between the slides and Simply Reports here. So in Simply Reports, I'm going right into the item report since we're talking about filters to use when weeding. And I'm going to stay in the item list report subcategory when we're talking over these filters. So the first thing you'll always want to do is limit to your location. And you can find that right away under the item general filters area. So I'm just going to click to expand this. And the reason for this is not only do you want to run the report on your own collection, but also because once you select your location, it's going to populate several other filters to select from, like the shelf location. Um, Beyond your assigned branch, the elements you select next are really going to depend on your library. So if you're just getting started running item reports or weeding reports, my recommendation to you is to start looking at item records from your area of the collection in LEAP. And you want to ask yourself, what fields or data, excuse me, do these items all have in common? So when you find that information, then you can come into Simpler Reports and see how that data appears in these filters. Now, for some libraries, filtering a weeding list may be as simple, I'm just scrolling down here, may be as simple as selecting a shelf location. A shelf location, again, it's found under this item general filters area. And you may be lucky enough, your shelf locations may be as specific as like youth large type or adult nonfiction Blu-ray. But sometimes those shelf locations don't filter down as specifically as you need. And that's when we'll need to take advantage of other filters. So let's now take a look to see what else can help us out. And I'm just going to scroll back up to kind of the top of the item general filters area. The first one I really want to highlight is this collection filter, which is found right under the assigned branch. The collection filter allows you to limit by age range. So there's different categories for adult, for teen, and for youth. So within the age range, you also can additionally limit to like fiction print items. So if I select youth fiction, that indicates youth print fiction. Nonfiction print items, they have a category for multimedia, which will include DVDs, Blu-rays, audiobooks, music CDs, more, magazines. And the nice thing about a collection code is that it can also help you quickly filter out e-content because any e-content should be cataloged under the collection code of online. So by selecting, youth fiction or youth nonfiction, you can automatically limit down not only to that age range, but also to print items. Um, so, maybe you're getting ready to read the teen fiction, mystery, and science fiction books all in one go. So with that, all you would need to do is select this teen fiction collection code, and it will limit to all fiction print items in the teen age range. Um, Another one I'm going to point out, and I'm sure you're familiar with this one, is material type. So material type is a value that's assigned to the item record, and it's going to reflect that particular copy. For a number of material types, for like books, large print DVDs, video games, more, they have multiple variations. So this is where we see like Blu-ray, Blu-ray Hot, and Blu-ray New. Depending on your library's collections, when using the material type filter, you may be selecting more than one material type at a go. So I'm just going to go down here. We've got book, book hot, and book new. So you may have copies of a title in your regular or book club area that uses a material type of book. And then also copies in like a hot picks area. So your library has some items with a material type of book and other items with a material type of hot. And then just in case, you can select multiple values within a filter just by holding down your control key, and that will allow you to click an extra value in there. Um, Let me go down to, oh, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to go up one. Record status. I just want to reference this real quick. So record status references the item record, and this is different than circulation status. So there's only three options here. The option of provisional indicates that the item record is still being worked on. So these are going to be items that haven't yet been released into the collection. They're still being cataloged. Final are item records that are all finished being cataloged, right? So they're in their final stage. And the third one is deleted. And these are records that have been marked for deletion, but not yet purged from the database. So with our deleted records, they're purged once a month. And using this status, it may not make a huge difference, but using this filter and selecting final will help exclude item records that either haven't been released into the collection yet and therefore have no circulations, or it will exclude item records that have already been marked for withdrawal and deleted, but just have not yet been purged. So, if you are working on a pretty consistently on a weeding project, you may run a report at the beginning of the month, do some weeding, run a different report at the end of the month, and using final will just kind of help exclude those records that you've already looked at and have already been marked for deletion. Couple filters down is our stat code. I like this filter a lot. This filter can be incredibly useful. First of all, for nonfiction selectors, because as you can see when I'm scrolling, there is a distinct stat class code for each Dewey Decade. So maybe you are just going to be weeding sports books right now, and you can come down, add in your stat class code filter, and select the 790s. And let's build on that for a moment here. So let's say you're running a reading list for adult sports books. So if you just use this stat class code filter, you'll also see items from the youth and the teen collections that use this code. So what you can do, you can use the stat class code of 790s and then layer on a collection code filter for adult nonfiction to filter out those youth and teen items and also filter out those like adult multimedia items that might use this stat code. Um, Beyond these Dewey decades, you'll also see stat codes. Let me get down here. There we go. You'll also see stat class codes that reflect a genre, like we've got action adventure. You'll also see like mystery, science fiction in here, or a format. So there's, let's see, I know board books is in here, graphic novels and manga are in here. So, the stat class code can also kind of help you get to that format or that genre that you're really focusing on. But again, I will say, do definitely take a look at your item records to see how these stat class codes are assigned. So, for example, if you are running a report on nonfiction graphic novels, do check to see if it's a Dewey stat class that's assigned to the item record, or if it's the graphic novel stat class that's assigned to the item record, and that will help you guide your decision about what filters to use. So I think those are the ones I wanted to highlight from the general filters. I'm going to move down here to some date filters. So there's several categories of date filters available based on how you want to frame that date. Oh, I see a chat. Let me just pause for a second here. Oh, great question, Mary Kay. Where would we find that info in the records? Let me pop into Leap real quick, and I have an item record open here. Um, so you will want to take a look. The controls area and the details area will have most of the information related to filters that you want to focus on. So under the controls area, this is where you can see what the material type is and what the stat class is. Um, and then I'm just going to pop into details real quick. In the details area of an item record, that's where you can check to see what collection is assigned to it and what shelf location is used as well. So yes, collections and details are the tabs that will give you a lot of great information about the item. Um, so our date filters here. So yes, a couple different categories of date filters based on how you want to frame that date. And the first category found under just item date filters. Let me click to expand that. This is what you'll want to use when you want to specify a period between two specific dates. The second and third date filter categories, or the relative date filter categories, and these date filters will be based off of the report run date. And I am going to expand item relative date filters prior to a specified date. So we can take a look at some of these options here. So this is where we can see, if you select one, then you can tell it I want to look for dates that fall between X number of days, months, or years before my report run date. So you don't have to do it in kind of math in your head. And some options that may be relevant to you when building your report is the age of an item. So for example, if you only want to consider items that have been in your collection for 2 or more years, use the first available date. And first available date reflects the date the item was first available for checkout. So this would be the date it moved from technical services out to the stacks. So this date reflects how old that actual copy is, but not the publication date. So you may have a copy of, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban that you purchased for the library in 2018, and the first available date is going to reflect that acquisition date rather than the 1999 publication date. My recommendation when you want to focus on the age of the actual copy is to use first available date and ignore creation date, right? So this is one of the most common questions I get related to dates in Simply Reports. So creation date reflects the date the item record was created, which may be well in advance of when that item went out into circulation if you order titles ahead of their publication date. So you can have a creation date that's like 6 months, a year older than that first available date. Another way you can filter your results is by using one of, I'm going to deselect first available date, using one of these last dates. So we've got like last inventory, last check-in, last checkout. Some of these are going to reflect a specific action. And these will be options like the last checkout or renewal date or the last check-in date. Now, the last circ status change date, that will give you the date the circ status was last updated, which could be from available to checked out, but it could also include something went from missing to available or available to repair. So it's not necessarily reflecting a checkout. Similarly, the output item of last activity date is going to be basically the last date any type of circulation action occurred with the item, which could be a checkout, a check-in, a status update. The item went in transit. So it's going to cover a lot of territory. So it's just something to keep in mind if you wanted to frame these dates around activity related to the item. If you are specifically looking just for checkouts, do use the last checkout or renewal date filter. You do have the option, so the next filter category is the item call number filters. Let me just expand this. You do have the option of using call number as a filter, but how you use the call number filter is going to depend on if your library has already gone through the call number split project with CCS. So in Polaris, call numbers are parsed out into different fields. If you were around back in like 2018 when we migrated to Polaris, in our old database, the call numbers were stored in a single field. So this meant that the call number data migrated into Polaris as a single field. Over the past couple years, libraries have been working very hard, one by one, to split their call numbers. And it's a lengthy process. We only have about 50% of libraries who have completed the split so far. So this also means that right now, you're going to use the call number field differently based on if you've gone through that split or not. And to illustrate this, I'm going to pop you into Leap so we can take a look at some examples. So this first item record, this is an example of an item that has a split call number. And you can see if it's split by looking at the controls tab in an item record and kind of going down, midway down to the call number area. So you can see there's data separated out into like the prefix, the classification, the cutter fields. So if this is your library and you wanted to use call number to generate a report, you can see, like, for example, here, I'm weeding the youth large type. So I can see, okay, well, I can use my prefix then and use that as a filter in the call number. So what I can do is I can come into my report here. Well, I said it was prefix. I can select my prefix as an active filter and just kind of add in what I want to do. And I'm just, so I'll just do like J large type to J large type. So, even though everything is going to have that same prefix, I will enter it in as a range. So, if you have those split call numbers, you might find that call number is a pretty easy field to use as a filter. Um, Let me show you an unsplit call number example. So this is the exact same title. And again, I'm in my controls tab and I'm just gonna come on. Oh no, it did. Oh my gosh. So this was my fault. Algonquin is currently in the process of splitting their call numbers. So from the time that I last looked at this item record and now, the call number has been split. Previously, what happened, so all of these different parts here were all just kind of lumped under the classification area. Um, and, so, depending on how the call numbers for your area are structured, if you are part of an unsplit library, you may be able to use it. It may take some experimenting, or you may find that having that unsplit call number is not going to work with that call number filter. And it'll probably easier just to combine other elements to build your report. So, for this example, if I did not have a split call number, I may opt instead to use a youth fiction collection filter along with a large print material filter to get down to my collection area. I'm sorry that example did not work out properly. So that was just kind of an overview of a number of filters that I find to be very helpful. Um, I want to get into the specific report examples so we can build some sample reports together. I will pause just for a moment if see if anyone has questions. Okay, great. Well, let's then talk about our first report example. So this is going to be a grubby items report. So for this first report example, we're running a grubby items report. And let's say we've got some extra money in our budget and we want to replace high use items. Specifically, let's look at high circulating youth Blu-rays. So we're going to run a report so we can see what our top circulating titles are and see if we want to replace them. So let me pop back into Simply Reports here. And I am once again going to build an item report, and I'm going to build an item list report because I want to see information on each individual record in there. And to clear out what I already have, I am just going to refresh my page. So let's just kind of start with some output options first. With our output, there's really no like solid right or wrong options. It's all going to depend on what kind of information you want to see about that item. So, some common ones are always going to be like barcode, item call number. Any output with the prefix of item is going to give us information specific to that single copy. Beyond the item prefix, we also have some mark prefix options. Output with a mark prefix will provide title level or bib level information. This is where we see options like author, title, publication year. Um, so this is where you'll come down and let's say for this one, I'm going to grab a publication year filter and I definitely I want a title filter in there. So, basically whatever information you want to see about that title and that information you'll start with. Now, for this report, there is an additional item level output that we want. Because we're evaluating the items based on how many times they've circulated, I do want to include the output of item lifetime circulation count. So let me just go back up to the output in its little alphabetical order. So item lifetime circ count. So I'm going to select that and move it over so it's in my report output. And for this report, it's also going to help me to select item lifetime cert count as my sort option. So I will automatically have my list sorted from highest circulating to lowest circulating. Moving on to our filters. So how are we going to tell Simply Reports what we want to look for? As always, we're going to start with our item general filters, and we're going to select our location. So we just focus on our own items. And for this example, let me select my library quick pick, and I will be Crystal Lake for today. And next we can apply the filters that make sense for our library. So let's say I don't have a specific Blu-ray shelf location I can use. So I'm instead going to combine the other item record elements to narrow down to my segment of the collection. Since I'm working with Blu-rays, let me scroll down here to material type. I can select material type, and I can select the Blu-ray material types. And for this one, I will select all three options: Blu-ray, Blu-ray Hot, and Blu-ray New. At this point, the report is going to return adult, teen, and youth Blu-rays. So I may also want to apply a collection filter to limit to the correct department. And in my prompt, I work with the youth collection area. So I am going to additionally apply a collection filter for youth multimedia. And this will filter out the adult and the teen titles. So if I submit this report right now, it's going to list every single youth Blu-ray in my library. Maybe you want that. Maybe you don't want to see all the titles. So to kind of help this, I'm going to apply one more filter to indicate that I only want to see a list of Blu-rays that have circulated more than 100 times. And for this type of filter, I am going to look under the section of item circulation filters. And let me just click to expand that. So this is where you can filter by those circulation counts. Since I'm focusing on lifetime circ, I am going to select the checkbox for lifetime circulation. And these filters give us the option of limiting by circs. We can either say less than a certain amount or greater than a certain amount. For a grubby item report, I, of course, want things that have circulated greater than a certain amount. So I'm going to select that option. And finally, I will pop in my desired value, which is, for this case, 100. Now, when I submit, I'm going to get a list of youth Blu-rays at my library that have circulated 100 times or more. So I can take this list, see if these titles are still in print, and choose to purchase a replacement so my library has a fresh copy. This report is also kind of fun to look at, not only for the grubby items situation, but just kind of see like what's been the most handled title in a certain area. So that is a grubby item report in a nutshell. Are there any questions about that type of report? Just double check. Okay. The next, oh, I do have a chat. Let me pop this up. Oh, okay. So what is the difference with mark title and mark sort title? Oh, Gretchen, I love that question. Let me go back to the item list report real quick. And I'm going to, let me just kind of go back up. So if we look under the mark output options, you might catch that there's two types of title. There's a mark sort title and just a regular old mark title. Mark title includes articles at the beginning of titles, Mark sort title does not. So it's all in if you want that article or not. I have a question here on how do we print out a report? So the best thing to do, so you'll see there's a couple different options of what you can do with your report output. The first one is download report output. If you select that, it's going to give you the option to download into an Excel file, and then you can print it from there. So the preview actually will only give you up to 100 results. So if you're running a waiting list, you're only going to see that a preview of those first 100 records. If you download that report into Excel, then you can print out the entire thing. You can even like manipulate the report, sort it a different way if you need to. I also have a question here. Hopefully that asks. I hope I'm not breezing through these too fast. I also have a question here about saving your report parameters. So you are able to basically save your report setup. So it will save the output options you select, and it will also save the filters you select. And you can then, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back and forth here. You can then go into the My Reports tab and run that same report at a later date. So what I'll do, I wasn't planning on going through that now, but we have some pretty detailed documentation about how to save and reference report parameters. So I will definitely send that out to the group with the recording link and all the other follow-up from the course. I will say though, if you are going to save your report parameters, when you're building the report, always make sure to use the item relative date filters in those cases, because if you just use these like calendar date filters, it will always give you that same report output because it's always referencing the same dates. Whenever you're going to save your report and run it at a later date, use these relative date filters because then it's always going to run the report referenced from the report run date. I hope that makes sense. Let me just double check chat again. Okay, those were some great questions. Thanks, guys. So the next report example I want to go over just highlights one of my favorite things about Simply Reports. And that is that you can take a record set that you built in Leap and use Simply Reports to expand on the information you see about the reports. So, I'm sure most of you have worked with item record sets in Leap. And when you're looking at a record set in Leap, it doesn't show you some information like the first available date or any of the circulation counts. So if you want to see that information listed out about those item records or sorted in a different way, we can use Simply Reports. So here's my prompt. At the beginning of 2020, we were weeding and we weren't quite sure about a handful of items. So we decide to hang on to them and evaluate them at a later date. So if they've circulated, we're going to hang on to them a little later. If they haven't, we're going to weed them. And what we did, we scanned those items into a record set and just kind of hang on to them. So now it's 2021 and it's time to reevaluate those items and check to see if they were used in 2020. And again, when you're looking at that record set in Leap, it's way too cumbersome to click into each individual record to check the statistics. So what we're going to do is use Simply Reports output to select what information we want to see about those item records. So I'm going to come back into this to Simply Reports and refresh my page so it clears out all of the existing stuff. So we're, of course, going to be running an item report. And again, we're going to be running an item list report because we want a list of items and we want to see data on each record. Might sound like a broken record here, but for the output, select whatever options are going to be relevant to your project. So, it may be just like last time, it may be the item barcode, that call number, some title information. I'm just going to skim down here. So we've got a mark title information and maybe a publication year. And item circulation status, I'm first filled date, whatever is going to help you out. So let's see, we've got some item information, some title information. Okay, and then for this example, one last output to select, and the whole reason why we're running this report is that so we can see the circulation stats from the previous year. So for my last output, I am going to add in, it's another item output option, and it's item previous year circ count. And that will give me, there it is, item previous year circ count. And that will give me the amount of times the item circulated in the previous calendar year. And for my sort, you can sort by whatever you want for this one. I'm going to choose item call number. Now for filters. So to have Simply Reports pull in item records from a record set, you will expand the Item General Filters area and select the very first filter for item record set. It's kind of hidden in between the Assign Branch filter and the top of the section. When you click on the little checkbox to activate the filter, because it's referencing, there's so many item record sets, it's referencing so much data, it might take a second or two for it to actually activate. So you might have to just take a step back for a second until it's activated. And then you can select your record set from a very long list of record set titles. Whenever you create a record set, I always tell people, please start your record set with your library's 3-letter code and your initials. It makes it so much easier to locate yours from that insanely long list. So I've got my record set here, and that's it. So that's all we need to choose for filters, because by using the record set, we've automatically limited the report to just the records we want to see. We've configured the output to give us the information we want, and that's it. I can submit, and it will give me my report output. So now I can see which items circulated last year, because one of the output options was this previous year circulation count. So I can see which items circulated last year, which items did not. And so I can decide now, yep, I'm ready to let that one go. Let's pop it on my weeding cart. So again, I really love the ability to use record sets with Simply Reports. It makes it incredibly easy, where you don't have to apply all those different filters. You can just apply that one item record set filter and have all of your records automatically populate the report output. Any questions on that one? Okay, let's move on. So report example 3 is kind of building off of that previous report. So here's something about Polaris. Polaris includes renewals in their circulation count. So when we were looking at that that report preview just now, and we saw that some items circulated 10 times, that means they've checked out and renewed a total of 10 times in the previous year. I'm just going to go into, let me just go into Leap real quick, because I do have an item record from my record set that I want to show you. So here's a video game record I want to use as an example. It has a renewal limit of 3, and you can find the renewal limit under the Controls tab. So if we look at the statistics, and let me just click into the statistics tab of this item record. If we look at the statistics here, it shows us that the previous year circulation is 9. But just as we just said, this number is going to include both initial checkouts and renewals. So this also means when you're running a report through Simply Reports, where you use the output circulation count values for year-to-date circ and previous year circ, it's going to include those renewals. So what I'm going to do now is show you a method that allows you to isolate checkout numbers for a set of items. To do this, we're going to use a filter and output called Item Record History Action. And this report can be a useful supplement to your regular weeding report. So before we start, I'm just going to put out a few notes about this method. So what the item record history action output and filter that we're going to use, what that refers to is the data in this history tab of an item record. So Polaris keeps 2 years of history data in the item record. So this method is going to give you data between 2 years ago and the report run date. Depending on what you're weeding and how you weed, 2 years of activity may be completely sufficient to make a decision. Or this report may just end up being more helpful to you as a supplement to your normal weeding list. Additionally, if a title has 0 related history actions, so for example, if an item has 0 checkouts in my time period, it's just not going to appear on the report. So those are just my little disclaimers about this output and filter. So for this report prompt, again, like I said, we're building on our previous report we just did with record sets. So this time I'm evaluating some older video game formats to check to see if they're still being used. And again, my video games can have up to 3 renewals. So one checkout can lead to increasing the circ stats for this item by 4 if the patron takes all of their renewals. So I just want to make sure I have as much information as possible for my weeding project. And I am going to run a report that isolates to the checkout history. Okay, so going back into Simply Reports, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone, but we are going to stick with our item reports. But this time, what's going to be different is we're going to run a count report. Not a list report, it's going to be a count report. And the reason for this is that we want to see a summary of the item history actions instead of a list of every occurrence. And when you want summaries, you want a count report. For the output, I do want to see most of the same information as my previous report. So let me select all my usuals, the barcode, the call number. I will also grab those, that mark information. I'll do a mark title and a publication year. Just enough so that I know what I'm looking at. This time, instead of using the previous year circ output, I am going to use the output item record history action. So let me select item record history action and I will move it over so it's part of my report. And I will also, like last time, I'm going to sort by call number. So using item history report action as an output is going to provide a count of how many times a particular history action occurred. So let's move on to filters again. We're still working off that record set, so I am going to expand my item general filters and select that same record set that I did before. And we go through here. I always overshoot it. There we go. So I've got my record set in, but unlike our last report, this time I do need to add a few more filters so I can tell Simply Reports what to count and during what time frame. So the key to this report is also adding the corresponding filter of history action. So this filter is found in the general filters area, and it's just history action. And I'm going to click to activate it. Now this filter lists all of the different types of entries that make up that history tab in the item records. There's a lot of options. When you're looking specifically for checkout history actions, you will be looking, the ones we need basically, they all start with checked out. So they're fairly easy to find and they're all lumped together. Some of these checked out options are going to apply only to e-content, right? So you see some like checked out pack, checked out third party software. Those are related to e-content. So the ones that relate to physical items are going to be checked out, which indicates it was checked out at a circulation desk. Checked out offline indicates it was checked out when circulation was using Polaris offline, say during a migration downtime. And checked out self-check, which is pretty self-explanatory, right? It was checked out at a self-check. Again, you can select multiple values by holding down that control key. I will say it's absolutely not going to hurt anything if you do end up selecting like one of these pack options. You know, like I said, if there's no corresponding history action, it's just not going to show up on your report. So it's not going to affect your report output in any way. Adding this filter, it may seem redundant because we already have history actions as an output. But if we don't limit to just the history actions we care about, this report is going to show a count for every single history action, which will include like checkouts, check-ins, even cataloging updates. So we for sure want to tell the report which options we're looking at. I'm just going to pause just for a second to check the chat. Oh, there's a good question here. Our library is starting to use the self-checkout feature in the Communico app. What type of checkout is that? So anytime, I imagine that would be a third-party software checkout. If you do ever want to check and see, a really cool way to kind of like experiment this is to take an item, check it out in that in the Communico app or whatever, you know, whatever tool you're using, and then come into the item record and see how was it recorded in that history tab. And that will tell you there exactly what history action to look at. But Kelly, I do believe that that is going to be a third-party software checkout. Let me just double check. Yes, yeah, and if it, you know, if you are testing and you find something different, let me know, please. Okay, so if I run my report now, it will give a count for these history actions that I selected, but it's going to give a count for the full 2-year period. So because I am focusing specifically on calendar year of 2020, I am additionally going to apply a date filter so I can focus on checkout activity from 2020. So I'm going to scroll down here, and this time I am going to use item date filters. So I can say, you know, January 1st to December 31st. The corresponding date filter for item record history action is this item record history action or I'm sorry, item record history transaction date. So this date filter simply reports what period of time to look for our history action in an item record. And this is where I'm going to specify that I want January 1st, 2020 through the end of December 31st, 2020. You will see, so there's a little asterisk here. This is the only output that has a footnote, or I'm sorry, the only filter that has a footnote. And let me just kind of show you what that footnote is. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of my page. The footnote just tells you that any transactions that occur today are not going to appear on the report, are not going to be included. For our report, doesn't matter since we're focusing on a period of time in the past. So now I'm ready to submit, and let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so the column labeled action taken tells you what history action the report is summarizing. And the number of items column actually is telling you how many times that action occurred. So remember, we had to select different types of checkout history actions. So this report is going to give us separate lines for the different history action types. So, for example, here, if I look at Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, the report is telling me that this item was checked out twice at a circulation desk, and it was checked out once at a self-check during 2020. In terms of our Captain Toad treasure tracker, when we looked at the item record, the stats tab said that Captain Toad had 9 circulations during 2020. But from our history action report, we can see that it was actually checked out twice. So all those remaining circulations are renewals. So this can help me then inform my decision about the items I'm going to weed. Why do we do this in a count report versus a list report? So if we see here, the options for running a report, let me just go back in into item list report. All of those options for the item record history is available in the list report. So you can 100% build this report as a list report as well. However, with the list report, it's going to provide separate line items for each occurrence of that history action. So when we're here for Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, we're going to have 2 separate lines for each, a separate line for each checkout. So we're going to see this duplicated on our report. So using this with a count report at least allows us to summarize the actions and condense our report a little more, so we're not going through and then like counting each single instance of a history. I know we're running a little bit tight on time. It's 10:55. I'm going to pause for questions. If you have to, if you have to get on desk, if you have to go, that's totally okay. I'm going to stay and go through our last example as well and stay for any other questions too. Again, this is all being recorded, so if you have to leave mid, question session, please refer back to that recording so you can see the rest. So pausing for questions for a second, otherwise we will get into our last example here. Okay, so for our last example, we're going to move away from item reports, and instead we're going to look at a bib report example. For this prompt, we are interested in expanding our adult Spanish language book collection, and you can also, substitute in Polish or Korean or another language. And we want to see what the top circulating Spanish titles are system-wide. So we can use this list to see if there's any gaps in our own collection. For this report, like I said, we're moving away from items and we're going to move into the Bibs tab. And this is because we don't want to report about individual library items. We're instead going to focus on that title level. And we're also going to take advantage of a feature that's available in the Bib Count Report section. Let's quickly start by organizing our output. You'll see here we don't have any item output options. And again, this is because we're focused on that title level data and not any data tied to individual item records. So for this one, I want to select enough information that will lead me back to the corresponding bibliographic record. And not to sound cold, but I don't really care about any of these bib dates or creators. I'm going to scroll past those down to this mark section. So this is where I'm going to select, like, again, my title, my author. When you're running a bib report, it will be very helpful to include the mark bibliographic record ID, which is the bib control number. So if you need to, you can search by bib control number in the find tool and open directly to a specific record. Let me just pop in. Also, I'm going to pop in a publication year and one of the title options. So I have this set up. Now, because I want to know what the most popular records are, I'm going to scroll down here because at the end we have some options that start with sum. And because we're running a count report, the sum options will count up or summarize the values. I am going to select the sum bib lifetime cert counts, this very first one here. And the bib lifetime cert count adds up the lifetime cert counts of all items attached to that bib, even ones from item records that have been deleted. And just like last time, I think I'm going to sort by that option. This way, the top circulating titles will be at the top of my list. So the next thing I want to do here, we're going to use this little optional box that's at the bottom of my output. This is important when running this type of report because otherwise, if you don't, it's going to return all of the bib records that match our filters, which can potentially be quite a bit. I'm going to select the checkbox for this optional and tell it that I want the top 100 bib records. So now it's going to stop after it gives me the top 100. For filters, you'll see there aren't as many filter options as you do with item records. And let's take a peek at this item record general filters. Skip over bib record owner. All bib records in our database are owned by Cooperative Computer Services, so this will do nothing to filter the records down. Instead, you'll have to layer on some of the other filters. So I am going to start by adding in this mark language filter. And this is where you can specify that you only want to see Spanish titles or Polish titles or whatever language you are focusing on in your collection. So let me go down. Do, 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 do. There we go. To keep our report more focused, in our prompt, we said you just wanted a list of adult book titles. So scrolling down a little bit, we do have also a mark target audience filter. And this is where we can indicate we only want titles for adults. So I'm going to select that. There are more options here than CCS catalogers use. So adult, adolescent, and then there's also juvenile. Those are the audience levels used with print materials and targeted audiovisual items. So I'm going to include the link to the CCS Catalogers wiki page that details the use of this field when I send out all the follow-up stuff. So if you want to read more about how that field is used in CCS, you'll have that link there. Finally, we also said we just wanted to see books. So in order to filter out movies and music, I am going to use this primary type of material filter and select book. So the primary type of material, it refers to the general format that you're looking for. And this is a value that's assigned to the bib record. So it's different than the Polaris material type, which is a local value assigned to an item record. So the primary type of material, or short TOM, the TOM is a format assigned to the bib record. And to make this a little more focused, I said I just wanted to focus on titles that were published in the last year. I want to make sure I didn't miss any titles from 2020 in my collection. So you can also apply this bib date filter, and they have a mark publication year option. So I can only focus on titles that were published in 2020. Okay, so I'm set with my filters, focusing on the top 100 bibs in Spanish language for adults that are books published in 2020. So now when I submit, it's going to give me that list. So here it will list out the bib record. I have that control number so I can search for this specific record very easily. And then it's going to tell me how many times that bib, all of the items attached to that bib circulated in CCS. And again, this number is going to include checkouts and renewals. So this might be a handy option. Keep in mind if you're just starting like a new language collection, or have a small collection and are intending to build it up, you can always also remove the publication date and get like the all-time top circulating bibs, which is kind of interesting to see. Okay, so we are a couple minutes over. I apologize for that. At this time, I just do want to see if there's anyone who has, if there's any questions or anything you want to check on. So let me open up my chat here. Yes, so the question is, would this represent totals between all libraries? Yes, it would. So here is the, oh my gosh, here is the report where it just looked at titles that were published in 2020. So for this top one here, there were 34 checkouts and renewals between all CCS libraries. So that's the thing, I guess the thing with the bib report is that because it's looking at that title level information and not filtering down to that item level information, it's going to have like that aggregate count. So we've got, can one just do an item report and report output column and select outputs at report output column and select outputs, and that's it for weeding. Do not need to do general filters. I hope I'm understanding this correctly. So let me go back to my item report here. So I guess the way to think about the difference between output and filters, your output options, this is where you tell Simply Reports what you want to see on that final report. So what information do you want to see about the records? If you only select, like if you configure some output and you hit select without adding in any filters, what it's going to do is it's going to run that report and return basically all of the item records in the database for you, which would be an insanely long Excel file. So it's always a good idea to apply some filters in here so you can at least get down filter down to items records at your library or item records of a certain material type, just so you're not getting a list of literally everything in the system. I hope I interpreted that. I hope I read that question correctly. Oh, good. Thanks, Susan. I'll be honest, I've always been kind of curious what that would be like, just running a report on all the records. I've been a little afraid to do it, so I've never tried to do it before. Right, yeah. So question is, if you want to see items only within our library when creating a report, we should not use the bib tab at the top. Yes. So if you just want to focus on those item records specific to your library, definitely choose this items tab. Let me just go back into bibs real quick and take a look at, because I don't even think, I know with the like the Leap Find tool, there's a way that you can filter down to assigned bib records at your location, or bib records at your location. I do not think that there is a corresponding, yeah, I unfortunately don't think there is a corresponding filter in Simply Reports to limit to just your location. Are all of the saved reports searchable in Leap? I know we use NIK labeled weeding reports set up by our TS department. Mary Kay, just real quick to clarify, are you talking about saved reports or record sets?
I'm sorry, record sets.
Oh, thanks. Yes. They should be, as long as those record sets are saved to the branch level or the library level, you should be able to access them in Simply Reports. And then also any record sets saved to your individual username. If you have a colleague that saves a record set to their individual username, I don't believe you will be able to access that through Simply Reports.
Yeah, we've run into that before where it's
Yeah.
like, it's like, well, it's if you didn't, name it as for the whole library, then
Right.
yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there an easy or simple way to run a similar report to what you just for Spanish books, but for items and collections that are not consistent across libraries? Oh, that's a good question. So for example, manage our parenting and teacher collections. Call number and prefix are specific to your library. How can I look at search in similar collections across libraries? Ooh, this is a really good question. Let me think about this, April. Um, for this, I might actually suggest doing maybe an item report. Um, Let me think here. So with an item report, I guess one thing you could potentially do um, is focus on locations other than your own. And in terms of like your example with the parenting and teacher collections, that stat class might be able to help you out there. And let me just select a branch here so I can activate that field and see if we have like a parent teacher. Oh gosh, there's so many. And I'll say if you're a multi-branch library, you see there is the stat codes then are duplicated based on the branch. So the list gets even longer. Yeah, so you might, I might actually suggest running an item report and using the stat code. April, let me think about this and see if I can like pull together maybe a sample report setup for you to explore. And then I will be in touch. I will be in touch. I'm going to explore this and get back to you. Yeah. Any other questions? And if later in the day, if something does pop into your head, always feel free to email help@ccslib.org, or email me directly, and we'll take a look at the questions. So for now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop the recording.